Yeah, I mean, I would try it.
Okay, Eric, I think we're ready
Yeah.
to start.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Welcome, everybody. This is the June 3rd, 2025 Landmark Preservation Commission meeting. I'm calling us to order at 1:00 p.m. We'll start with introductions. I am Erica Warzel. I'm an architectural historian and preservation consultant, and I was nominated by the community at large. Chris?
Chris McInnes. I'm a forensic architect and I was nominated by the mayor's office.
I'm Larry Sykes. I'm an architect. I was nominated by History Colorado.
I'm Rusty Brown. I'm an architect and was nominated by AIA.
I'm Bree Salmon. I'm an interior designer and project manager, and I was nominated by Denver Planning Board.
And I'm Brittany Bryant, Denver Landmark Preservation staff.
And I'm Emily Hazen, designer and preservationist nominated by City Planning.
Great, thank you. I think we had a brief reminder. Yes, staff wanted, as the Governor Jared Polis's pedestrian walkway from the Capitol down into Lincoln Veterans Memorial Park, I think is the name of it. It's called the Colorado 150 Pedestrian Walkway. That is within the Civic Center Historic District and will be reviewed by the Landmark Preservation Commission. So just wanted to do a gentle reminder to not discuss that project outside of this public meeting. If you do, you would need to recuse from that item, but probably looking at that sometime in the coming summer meetings for commission review. So just wanted to do a reminder, as it's been in the news a fair amount lately, and it is within our purview, even though it is on state property. Thank you, Brittany. All right, next on our agenda, we have meeting records for approval from our May 20th, 2025 meeting. We don't actually have to take a vote on this, but if commissioners have any corrections or questions about it, we can note those now. Okay, sounds like they're good to go. Then we have our public comment, but before we get into that, I'll just remind those of you joining us virtually, which I think is everyone, that we have some audio tips for you. So for better sound quality, we strongly encourage you to download Zoom on your device. And from there, you can click audio settings to bring up an additional menu, to add a background noise suppression, and test your speaker and microphone for their maximum output volumes. And then if you are presenting as part of a project or going to make a public comment, when it's your turn to speak, you'll need to unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen. You can also expand the menu next to the microphone to reveal additional options, such as selecting your speaker and microphone devices, testing them, and adjusting their volumes. And if you still have audio challenges, we ask that you switch to your phone for audio. All right. So at this point of our meeting, we open this up for public comment, either for comments about historic preservation in general, or items on our design review agenda, business items, or discussion items. If you would like to speak, you have up to 2 minutes, again, for preservation in general in the city or any of these items on our agenda at this time. We won't have a public hearing portion of our meeting today, so that is not relevant. But when it is your turn to speak, or if you would like to speak, we ask that you raise your hand by clicking that button in Zoom, or you can dial *9 on your keypad to raise your hand if you're joining by phone. If you're having trouble with either of these options, we ask that you email landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number so we can recognize you through the Zoom app and we'll call upon you there. So is there anyone joining us who would like to make a comment on this time? Again, either on general topics of preservation or on one of our agenda items today. Doesn't look like we have any commenters, so we will move on to our consent agenda. The consent agenda are routine design review items that are recommended for commission approval without discussion. Applicants with items passed on the consent agenda should coordinate separately with their landmark preservation staff to receive a certificate of appropriateness. There is no public comment for consent agenda items. So I will announce each of these projects by address and then ask if commissioners have any desire to remove any from the consent agenda for further discussion under design review. Commission members will also need to announce any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest on any of these items. Then we'll consider a motion and vote. And if your project is approved on consent, you may leave the meeting or you're welcome to stay with us to hear the rest of our agenda. So we have 6 items on our consent agenda. They are project 2024-COA-956 at 571 North Emerson Street, 2024-COA-875 at 701 North Marion Street, 2025-COA-389 at 18300 West Alameda Parkway, 2025-TAXC-008 at 227 South Lincoln Street, 2024-TAXC-008 at 900 East 5th Avenue, and 2025-TAXC-019 at 901 North Race Street. Commissioners, any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest? Are there any of these that you would like to remove from the consent agenda for design review? Right. I think we're ready for a motion then.
I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Thank you, Emily. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Larry. All those approve?
All right.
Aye. Any opposed?
and or abstain. All right, so the consent agenda has passed. And again, if you have your project on this, you're welcome to stay with us for the rest of it, or you can leave the meeting. Today we have one design review item. I will announce it by address, and then we'll again ask for any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest from the commission members before we hear from staff, who will introduce the application and their recommendation, after which commissioners may question them. Then we'll hear from the applicant team, who are in total limited to 10 minutes, and commissioners then may question the applicant. We'll hear from staff for any clarifications if needed before we move into deliberation and then a motion and vote. So for project 2025-COA-387 at 3429 North Alcott Street, we have Crystal. I'm sorry, any conflicts of interest or, okay, I think we're ready to hear from you then.
Is it working?
Yeah, I set it till later. It wanted to restart, so,
Can you turn your camera on?
okay, thanks. Okay, so here's the property at 3429 North Alcott Street. This property was built in 1885.
Presentation.
Cool. And is located in the Potter Highlands Historic District. It's a two-story contributing structure in the district. The property appears to have been heavily altered over time with the replacement of the historic porch with a metal and fiberglass style porch cover, the addition of a stone veneer covering at the bottom half of the structure, which you can see here. And most of the historic wood windows have been removed and replaced. Several window openings have also been infilled on the structure, and historic windows were replaced with incompatible slider windows and windows that do not fit the historic openings. Next slide. So here's the proposed front elevation on the structure. On the left, outlined in orange. On the right is the existing conditions. The applicants are proposing to remove most of the incompatible and non-historic alterations to the structure, like the stone veneer at the front facade and that metal and fiberglass porch cover, meeting design guideline 2.5, which states to remove later covering materials that have not achieved historic significance. The front door is also not original and is proposed to be replaced with a half-light door that better matches the historic context. The applicant is restoring the altered and partially infilled window openings here at the first floor, maintaining the arched headers and adding aluminum-clad wood windows that match historic proportions, meeting design guideline 2.14. The applicant is also proposing to replace two historic windows at the second floor front facade with new aluminum-clad wood windows to match historic proportions, as well as two windows at the south elevation dormer. If the windows are shown to be damaged beyond repair, Landmark staff would support this replacement. However, detailed photos of the windows and assessment of their current condition has not been provided to Landmark staff. Therefore, at this time, without further information, Landmark staff would recommend denial of these window replacements, as the historic windows have not been proven to be damaged beyond repair and are the only remaining historic windows on the structure, and does not meet design guideline 2.19A, which calls for the windows to be replaced if damaged beyond repair. Next slide. Here's the north side elevation. The new proposed elevation is at the top of the slide with that photo elevation of the existing conditions at the bottom. As you can see here, there are two new shed dormers being added to this north elevation of the structure towards the rear. The new dormers are set back from the first floor roof eave, and the building's original roof line remains predominant. The dormers are subordinate to the overall roof mass. However, the two new dormers tie into the existing ridge line of the roof and are not below it. And there is an existing dormer on the south side of the home with a hipped roof. Landmark staff did suggest matching that style, but the applicant chose shed dormers instead, saying it was for head height. Guideline 2.28H states do not add a shed dormer in a visible location if shed dormers are not seen in the surrounding historic context. The applicant has not provided evidence of other shed dormers in the surrounding historic context, and Landmark staff did not see any on this block using Google Street View. Landmark staff do have some concerns over adding these shed dormers, but they are set back 15 feet from the front facade and will not be highly visible. The applicants are retaining 2 of the non-historic slider windows here towards the front of the house, but are also removing non-historic windows towards the rear of the house and adding new windows that better match historic proportions in some of these infilled openings. Next slide. Here's the south side elevation, the new proposed elevation at the top again with the existing condition at the bottom. At the top, you can see the existing south dormer where those windows are proposed to be replaced. Again, staff is unclear if these are original windows or if they are damaged beyond repair, so has recommended a condition for these windows to be removed from the scope of work without further information. Here you can also see the existing elevation below, that the 2 existing non-historic windows will be removed, 1 altered window opening will be infilled, and then 4 new windows will be added at this elevation. 2 existing window openings that are being restored and 2 new openings that are being added. Guideline 2.14E states to avoid adding a new opening. However, one of these new window openings is toward the rear of the structure and will not be highly visible. The other new opening closest to the front facade will be more visible, but this side elevation has also been heavily altered over time, so it may be appropriate in this instance. Additionally, the new windows state that there will be a new precast sill. However, material specifications for the sill was not provided and will also need to be included as a condition of approval. Next slide. And then here's the new rear proposed elevation on the left with the existing conditions on the right. The rear enclosed porch, which is non-historic, will be removed and converted to a covered porch. French doors will be added to the 2nd floor to access a new rear balcony above the covered porch. And then here you can also see that a chimney will also be removed at the rear. Next slide. And then here at the top right is the 2nd floor interior floor plan and the roof plan at the bottom. The shed dormers are large, so I did also review them against design guidelines for residential additions 3.9 through 3.11, which they meet overall, except for the shed dormers appear to be inset from the 1st floor eaves just 1 foot instead of the required 2 feet due to interior design challenges per the applicant. Staff also wants to note here that we did receive an email from the Highland United Neighbors last week in regards to these 2 dormers. They did point out that there is an existing conservation overlay for Potter Highlands in the zoning code that limits dormers in this area in several ways that may affect this design. Staff did let them know that as Landmark, we only review for design guideline adherence, which is why I did not forward this email to you all, because it's not really in our purview, but I did forward the comments to the applicant to let them know they could have zoning design challenges as well. Next slide. So staff is recommending approval with these conditions. Basically to add material details for the windowsill and the siding, manufacturer specs, and then also that the historic windows on this not be replaced at this time without further information and an assessment.
Thank you, Crystal. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Okay, I think we're ready to hear from the applicant. Those of you on the applicant team, when you've been invited to speak, and when you're ready to do so, you can unmute and then introduce yourself with your name, and you'll have up to 10 minutes altogether to present your project.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Okay, yeah. Let's see. So it's in the Potter Highlands, and it's a slightly unusual
Hey, what's your name?
what? Oh, George Kokoros, registered architect, licensed architect in Colorado, and Crystal kind of laid it out pretty well. So I don't want to. One of the main challenges is the house is very old and had many modifications to it. pretty much looks like the front half, more or less, is somewhat original, and then there was an addition later on, various additions later on. The and she also, pretty well explained some of the reasonings for the things like things that didn't quite conform, like the shed dormers, where it was just kind of a little difficult. I'm trying to get as much of as steep of a pitch on that roof, just for more practical reasons of water shedding and things like that, and leaky roofs. And definitely I will adjust the design for those two particular windows where I marked to be replaced to be taken out, unless we maybe during construction if we find that they are substandard, maybe leaking or severely damaged, that we would have to then I would further provide that information. The design is fitting a particular, not one of the issues that was for this project was that the historic model for this house isn't very common in this neighborhood. So it's only a couple houses in I think kind of in Curtis Park area that are similar to it. So yeah, that was the main thing. I was trying to kind of come up with something that would match this particular model of this house.
Okay, thank you, George. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Could you please speak more specifically to the rationale of the shed versus hipped gable? I know that there, you always
Yeah.
want to interior, but
Yeah, part of it is the hip. I'm not even sure if the hip is something that was added later. From the looks of the existing house, that hip was done. It seems to be right on the border of where the new and the old are. If you can go to one of the south side view, I think it is. South. There we go. Yeah. So there's that existing hip is right on the line where the new and the old are. It's kind of in the newer part, but I don't think that roof would have been built like that at the time. There would have been, I'm not sure what the other end would have been, probably another mansard type roof on that end, or so it's likely that might have been added later. And this house type, it's hard to tell what the model is for a dormer. If you look at the front of this house, they're more like that. If you go over to the front elevation, where you'd have this sort of the sidewalls of the roof to have that mansard look, that's sort of coming up from the roof line, and sort of instead of having sidewalls, they seem to have this roof that meets up to a shallower roof pitch above. I could try to come up with something more like that. One of the things is that sort of holding everything back 15 feet limited things a little bit. So I just kind of made a more defined point at with that wall to be at that 15 feet, and it seemed a little more easier to kind of express the compliance than with, let's say, a side sort of a side roof coming up into that dormer. Like for example, I could probably do something like that on that end. So where those dormers are, there's only, like I said, there's only a few houses that are actually like this, and they're not in the neighborhood. So it's hard to kind of determine what would be a historic dormer for this. And I don't think they were hips. But like it was just kind of an unclear how to comply on that one. We could, if you want to take a look at some of the houses, I think Crystal had mentioned that were of this type that were on, I think it's Arapahoe Street in Curtis Park area. We could take a look at that and just see what those are like. But that was kind of the main kind of. I didn't really think that the hip dormer was sort of a point of this particular style.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. Crystal, did you have any further comments or clarifications? Okay. All right, we're ready to deliberate. Commissioners, what did you all think?
Actually, I'm sorry, I do have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the windows, maybe might change his strategy on the windows, so that might negate the need for condition 3 if he's withdrawing.
I believe if we have the application that says they're going to remove, that we need to have the conditional approval.
I just am trying to understand that.
It's because we approved the plans, not the documentation in this meeting.
Thoughts on meeting the design guidelines? Staff's recommendation?
Yes, the dormer detailing is an interesting question. Not necessarily perturbed given how set back it is being a shed dormer. But I think the applicant brought up some interesting points about, I think it might be more compatible if it had more of that mansardy kind of form to it. So yeah, I guess the only reason I'm bringing that question up is if we approve this with these conditions, then he's kind of stuck with that. That shed dormer, and if we did a denial, then he could go back and redevelop that. I don't know if other commissioners feel
I think he probably wants the dormer, though, don't you think?
the shed
I'm sorry, the shed.
is probably more straightforward.
Yeah, I think going the other way wouldn't spread it out a little bit further, and that 15 feet probably becomes an issue. I think is probably what he was trying to say. I kind of agree that there doesn't really seem to be a defined style with this house. You know, it's kind of a little bit all over the place. So meeting whatever expectation, I can see where it could be difficult to meet whatever design, you know, that they're going for, so.
Erica, do you have an opinion on the typology?
Yeah, I guess, you know, it's hard, it's the language of like model that was kind of being used isn't quite accurate because this wasn't a model house, but you know, I think regardless, the size of the dormers are, the more complex the roof form, I think the more incompatible they might very well be. And there isn't necessarily a type of dormer that fits this building. I think it's pretty clear that dormers would most likely be an addition, possibly a historic addition, but you know, what type or style of roof those dormers had historically could vary quite a bit. But again, I think the size of the dormers that's being proposed, the shed kind of seems to fit the best just because it's the most simple. That's my opinion.
I do have some, you know, concerns about the 2.28H, which says that shed dormers can't be, you know, visible from the street unless evidence is presented, and none has been. And also the fact that, I know that this isn't within our purview, but just functionally or technically I have a question, Brittany, of whether or not they have to edit the design based on that that overlay. Would they then have to resubmit if the design is edited if we approve the shed dormer?
Yes,
So
it could be though,
creates-
if depending on what that modification is, it could be something that could be staff level. We wouldn't know until we get there. I'm not entirely clear why the RNO said it doesn't meet the conservation overlay. The conservation overlay is pretty limited to tandem houses and where they're kind of placed. They do have some requirements about bulk plane, but this isn't in the bulk plane. Like
That's for dormers. It has like a, basically a list that maximum width is 12 feet.
that's not for the conservation overlay though. That's when dormers are in the bulk plane, which these are not in the bulk
I'm
plane.
not
So
zoning, so I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't.
again, we're not zoning, but Crystal and I talked about it and I was just looking into it while we're sitting in here, cause I was seeing the drawings and I was like, it's not violating the bulk plane, so I'm unclear if they would have to redesign it, but again, Crystal and I are not zoning.
Understand, yeah, just trying to understand the process.
But I was just looking at all the things, cause I was like,
But if it does change, it would come back to us, and if we thought it was a big enough change, it would come back to you. If we thought it was minor, then we could administratively review it.
You know, as far as the shed dormers go in a visible location, obviously that's kind of open to interpretation. We've definitely approved shed dormers when set back, 15 feet. Maybe, I think we had a recent one that was maybe technically not a shed dormer, more of a pop top, but it was on a hill, so it was even more, further, less visible. But in some ways, I still feel like this is fairly innocuous. It's not like it's being put on the front facade or right up front at the corner there. So that's just my take on it, that it seems like it still kind of generally meets the spirit and intent of design guideline 2.28.
I would be a little concerned that kind of trying to engineer a more complicated roof line would just draw attention to the dormer.
Yes.
So
Yeah, and there is a residence right next to it on the dorm, I believe on the dormer side, that's 2-story, that's rather large, and it's a pretty tight lot line, right?
so for the view lines.
So I don't know that it's gonna be like super, it's not like a corner lot or something like that.
Any other thoughts?
I think that the shed's a nice, simple solution.
All right, do we have a motion? And if one would like to make a motion, you might want to refer to the staff language, if that's what you would like to do.
I can take it.
Thanks.
I move to approve with conditions application 2025 COA-387 for the alterations and 2 dormer additions at 3429 North Alcott Street as per design guidelines 2.5, 2.14, 2.19, 2.20, 2.28, 3.9, 3.10, 3.11, character defining features for the Potter Highlands Historic District. Presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report with the following conditions. Add the proposed material specifications for precast windowsill material that is brick or neutral colored stone to match the existing structure. Show locations on all elevation drawings of sills under the window on the first floor. Add manufacturer specifications for the wood and cement fiberboard shaped shingles. The exterior cladding material may match the exposure found on the existing structure at the rear, or shall be a material with a maximum of 4 to 6 inches of reveal exposure. Siding materials to be free of knots, rough, unfinished appearance, and other imperfections. The 2 historic windows in the front facade second floor and the windows on the south elevation second floor dormer may not be approved for replacement without detailed evidence showing they are damaged beyond repair. Please update the plans showing detailed photographs and evidence they cannot be repaired or remove that for the scope of work.
All right, thank you, Emily. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Chris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Or abstained? All right, the motion passes and you're approved with conditions. Thank you. We have a business item and a discussion item. So the business item, our portion of our agenda, we do deliberate and vote on these. So I'll announce the item and then we'll hear from staff about the item, and then we can question staff and then have any clarifications if needed before we deliberate and consider a motion and vote. So this is discussing the upcoming joint Landmark Preservation Commission and Lower Downtown Design Review Commission meeting that's being proposed for July.
So cast your minds back. You may remember in 2023, or you may not, because you might be a new commissioner, discussion of Wynkoop Crossing Bridge, which is a pedestrian bridge that will connect Lower Downtown with Ball Arena. This pedestrian bridge spans over the Lower Downtown Historic District, the Spear Boulevard Historic District, and the Downtown Design Review Board in Ball Arena. However, the LPC and the LDDRC are quasi judicial boards, and both the commissions did express interest in doing a joint meeting to discuss this project, where you would review, hear testimony from staff and the applicant jointly, but then deliberate separately and make a motion separately on the portions of the pedestrian bridge that are within each commission's purview. So the applicant is preparing to submit, and I did hold a commission for best availability. And with alignment with the Lower Downtown Design Review Commission, the best availability was July 29th at 1 p.m. for a joint meeting of the commission. So each commission will need to make a motion to set that special meeting and for us to hold that meeting. On that agenda, we will only review the Wynkoop Crossing Bridge, but that will bring us up to 3 meetings in July.
Thank you, Brittany. Any questions? Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
We're meeting here, I'm sorry.
Yes, we'll meet in this room here.
I can do that. I move to set a special joint meeting of the Landmark Preservation Commission and Lower Downtown Design Review Commission of July 29, 2025 at 1 p.m.
Thank you, Rusty. A second?
So,
Thank you, Larry. All those in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Right, the motion carries and we will be meeting on July 29th. We have one discussion item. These are informational items for commission to discuss without action. So we'll hear from staff about this and then have a chance to discuss among ourselves and with staff. And again, no actions or votes will be taken for this item. So we'll be hearing from staff about design guidelines for the Denver Landmark Structures and Districts update.
So we are so pleased to announce that we have a public review draft of the windows section that staff has been working on for a number of years. That will be posted to our website tomorrow. If you want to participate, excuse me, you can scan this QR code and it'll take you right to our website. But if you're on our homepage and you click on Landmark Preservation Initiatives and then click on Landmark Preservation Design Guideline Update, it will take you right to that document. In terms of the windows design guidelines that we have been working on updating, this initially started a few years ago when Abby Chrisman did research on 20 peer cities. And we weren't specifically just looking at windows, we were looking at guidelines for all types of things because we are doing a comprehensive update to our design guidelines, but working very slowly through that process. So we did look at 20 peer cities to see what other cities had to say about windows guidelines. And then, I'm so sorry. Jesse and Abby did present at 3 public meetings with the public on what those peer city guidelines say, and we did receive some public feedback on some of our guidelines. So you can see those meetings up there. Our biggest attendance was the September 6th Zoom meeting where we had about 200 people participate, which was really exciting for us because that was like the biggest meeting we ever held. But then we followed it up with an in-person meeting where it was only like 6 people. So that was a real come down from the first meeting. We did discuss this with the LPC on February 6th, 2024. And then from September 2023 to actually, I believe the discussion date with the commission was 2023, not 2024, but maybe I'm wrong. We did have a online survey open for the public where we did get a fair amount of participation in that survey, asking general questions about how we should update the design guidelines, some new concepts we potentially wanted to introduce in the design guidelines. So now we are at the point where we have finally drafted those guidelines and they will be online available for public comment until July 7th. And then we plan to bring those guidelines back to the commission for a discussion item. Depending on how the LPC discussion item goes, we'll either have 1 or 2 discussion items, but we're projecting LPC adoption of the new window guidelines in September of 2025. And we are so excited about this. As you know, we get several window violations in, and so what we wanted to do with the update to the windows guidelines is really to provide a little bit more flexibility and guidance on how to replace windows in our historic districts. So right now, our guidelines state that you cannot replace windows unless they are deteriorated beyond repair. We are proposing to replace that kind of language with windows can be replaced on all elevations of the structure if they are common windows. So what a common window would be is a simple like 1/1 window. There is a definition in the draft document, so I do encourage you to look at that. But the community and the commission did indicate to us that there was this desire to preserve character windows and character front facade doors. So these are windows that have special glazing, so like a leaded glass, special mullion patterns, special materials, or a special shape. So you can see some examples on character windows up on the screen. And many of these images were part of our survey where we did poll the public on what character windows were at our discussion item with the commission back in February of 2024. We did also talk with the commission about what a character window is. So if a window does happen to be a character window, that window would need to be preserved. And the idea behind that is that these are not as easily replicable windows and do have a special character to them. And we are proposing that they would need to be preserved anywhere on the facade. So that is a big change for these design guidelines. So again, allowing greater flexibility, but really focusing on those windows that are special and would be much more difficult to replace. And if they are lost, you would really lose something relating to the architectural character of the structure. So there are definitions for character windows and character front facade doors and common windows and doors in the new draft. So I do highly encourage the commission and the public to look at those definitions because they do guide how we treat the new guidelines. In terms of the new guidelines too, we wanted to provide better clarity in this section and flow of how that section works. So the section opens up with what you can do with openings. And that's just the window opening itself. It's not really talking about the window particularly, but we get lots of questions about adding new openings on side elevations, front facade elevations, and we don't really have a lot of guidance on what to do with that. So we wanted to provide more guidance with that. In terms of that, our guidelines do talk a lot about what public visibility means. So Jesse did draft a new definition of what public visibility and public vantage points means. You can find that in the current definition in chapter 1, but you'll see our new proposed definition at the beginning of this Windows draft as well, because it really impacts how we are treating visibility and where we allow flexibility for new openings, etc. So that is the first section of the guidelines. And then the next section of the guidelines talks specifically about character windows and how they should not be replaced. Because again, we want to preserve these special windows. However, if they are deteriorated beyond repair, we do have guidelines to deal with that situation. And then it has material guidance when you do have to replace those character windows. A big thing here is we just really want to match as closely as possible when we're talking about replacement of character windows. So that is what those guidelines talk about. And then it transitions into guidelines about common windows. And again, greater flexibility, you can replace those as long as you're matching the profile of that window. We don't really talk about operation in these sections because when we came to the commission in 2024, it was less concern about the operation style of the window and more concern about the profiles. So it does give very specific guidance about profiles. And then in our current guidelines, for some reason, the egress window section is like just sandwiched right in the middle of the windows guidelines. We are moving that to the end, and then we have egress guidelines for basement windows and then egress guidelines for above grade. So we do see a fair amount of above grade egress windows. We don't have great guidance. Our current guidelines really talk about just below grade, so we just wanted to provide more clarity there. So we're really excited for the commission and the public to review these drafts. We're really proud of the work we've done here. You know, looking at peer cities and what they do. Character window is not a new idea. We did borrow it from other peer cities, but we do think this will help allow greater flexibility, reduce the number of violations that we're seeing for windows, and really preserve what matters. So we're very excited about that. And then maybe a smaller but also pretty significant update is we're updating chapter 1 as well. So chapter 1, the big goal here was to provide a better logical flow and improved clarity for how that chapter is laid out. So it does have an improved layout where it kind of talks about why we preserve, and then Denver's guiding documents, which is the comprehensive plan and things of that nature, considering historical significance, and then talking about the design review process and the demolition review process. So anything about the design review process has now been moved together into one section. Anything about the demolition review process has been moved together in one section, because previously it was kind of sprinkled throughout the chapter. We did also refine some of the sentence structure and remove some of the redundant language from this section, as there was a lot of that. But two big updates to this section, again, is that definition to visibility and public vantage points. So you'll see that those definitions here in this chapter and in the draft for the Windows guidelines. And then finally, we have a current requirement that talks about demolition that triggers a public hearing. So the guidelines currently right now have kind of 4 situations that trigger a public hearing. So the first situation is any front facade feature. The second is 40% of the exterior walls. The third is 40% of the exterior roof. And then the fourth is 40% of the exterior walls and roof together. So that first condition, any front facade feature, causes us a lot of grief, particularly talking about porches. Many of the porches here in Denver are wood. Obviously, they deteriorate. Many people will just want to take down their deteriorated porch and replace it exactly as it is to match the existing conditions. We also have had some situations where cars have hit porches and have severely damaged those porches. So anytime someone wants to demolish those porches because they've deteriorated beyond repair, they've had to go through the public hearing process. Per our ordinance, the public hearing process, we have to notify the commission. The applicant then has to place notice on the property 13 days prior to the public hearing, and then we hold the public hearing. So that's about a month between notification to the commission and actually holding the public hearing. So we've updated the language for this first what triggers a public hearing section to say that if you are replacing any front facade feature that is deteriorated beyond repair, we do not have to do a public hearing anymore. If you want to demolish your porch just because, that would still trigger a public hearing. So those are the kind of the big changes to chapter 1. So we're really, really excited about these. This has been years of work for myself, Jesse, Amy, and I see Jen took herself off this discussion item, but she's also been involved in this process as well in updating these guidelines. But I know Jesse and I are so excited to be sharing these with you today, and I'm sure Amy and Jen feel the same.
Brittany, the facade feature, those that don't require, or those that require, are damaged beyond repair, would they come before the commission, or they, depending on like their level, may or may not be administratively approved?
Yeah, they may still be administratively approved. They may be something that requires commission review depending on the specific project scope.
Yeah, okay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
I think this will clarify and hopefully prevent a lot of the violation paperwork.
That is our goal.
Did anything change in terms of window frame material? I know that was a big
There is some different language in there when talking about common windows. For character windows, we still would like to see wood and aluminum clad wood at this time. That's what the draft language proposes, but more flexibility for common windows and the materials.
Some of the character windows you had though were steel.
Yes,
So
it does provide more guidance when you're talking about steel. We do say replace with steel or aluminum, so in the current draft.
do you mind going back to the slide that gives the timeline?
Yeah.
So the
Sorry.
yeah, so the August, that will again be a discussion item. So once again, not for a motion or vote, but will we be hearing like a summary of like the public review?
So that the public review draft will close July 7th. Between July 7th and the August discussion items, staff is going to go through all the public comments. We usually create some kind of chart. Some of them, we usually like color code it in some way, like we'll accept these. These are ones we're proposing that we'll reject, and then these are ones we want to discuss with the commission. And then all that material will go out to you as the commission for review. You are also more than welcome to comment on the public review draft as well. So, you don't have to save your comments until the discussion item.
And then the September meeting, is that a public hearing?
So that will be a public hearing. It does require noticing with the Daily Journal and the clerk and recorder's office. That is a very detailed process in terms of what we have to do to adopt guidelines. And then it does need to be, usually it's, well, not usually, it's always signed by the LBC chair. So that would be you, Erica, and then the city attorney's office. Sometimes we do set an effective date. Sometimes we just say it's effective as soon as the guidelines are signed officially. So we can discuss that more in depth at that adoption/discussion item.
I know this is something I've asked before, but is there any way that the word guidelines can be replaced?
I don't think so.
Just not in the future either?
Are you
Well,
looking
I've
for
heard you
standards?
say that, and we may need to talk about it in more depth to understand. They are guidelines. They are not all required to be met. They have to be balanced. And so it is important that we choose the right term. But I'd like to hear some more from you about what
we
your
can do.
concern is.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So, for applicants who are submitting things kind of in this near term, you know, such as something you looked at today, is the staff advising them that these may change and that there may be some additional flexibility if they wait, or?
Well, we've been advising people that for like
I
a
have-
year.
Yeah, I feel like that's come up before,
Years.
yeah, so like it was never focused.
Yeah, we definitely are, even kind of violations, as long as they're not egregious at this point. I don't wanna say we're sitting on them, like, I have a violation that the commission reviewed where they installed vinyl windows. The new guidelines, we're not gonna allow vinyl windows still, but they potentially wanna go back with a composite, cause they have a common window. So I'm just kind of sitting on that application right now, to see where these guidelines go. So, you know, we are trying to be accommodating that we will likely be adopting more flexibility, by the fall.
Great.
But if someone really wants to move forward with their application as is, they always can and be subject to the existing guidelines.
Well, yeah, it's very exciting. Looking forward to seeing it. I think we're done. Before I dismiss us, just wanted to remind the commissioners and make sure the public knows that our June 17th meeting has been canceled due to a lack of complete applications filed by the filing deadline for that meeting. So we will reconvene in July. So I think we are done. I'm closing this meeting at 1:55 p.m. Thank you.